as well. So yeah, you know, both of these players really vying for a title, but it's going to be an amazing match.
I cannot wait. I mean, I'm already looking at just the threat level of that Garganackle as well. I feel like that's a Pokemon that we haven't been able to see too often, but honestly, I was looking at that and I thought, wow, this would be really great to operate in Trick Room. You know, you've got the Mimikyu available on Jiseok's side that actually doesn't have Trick Room available, so you're kind of looking at that and going, okay, well really, where is this Garganackle going to fit on this team? And a lot of that is just being bulky, but also Salt Cure. That move has been impactful for the Garganackle that we've seen.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm just really interested about in this matchup is James's team inherently has a very strong duo in Abomasnow plus Cetitan, and so you know, one of the questions I have is, do you just play into that mode here? I think both are fairly powerful. It has to worry about the opposing Golden Go on the opposing side, but one of the things is that both Abomasnow and Cetitan have defensive Terra types here, specifically the Water Terra, and so by going for that, you can get around the super effectiveness from Make It Rain from Golden Go. And so I think Jiseok, if you're really worried about the Abomasnow and the Cetitan, you can play towards, first of all, your Golden Go. You've got the Baxcalibur as well, and the Tauros. Tauros in particular can intimidate the Cetitan, which I think can be really valuable. But I think this match will, a lot of it will be kind of baiting out potential defensive Terras and playing around that, because both of these players have a lot of good defensive Terras.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen how Terras can either be super impactful as a defensive mechanism, or it can also give you an opening to your opponent that they might just be able to take advantage of here. But one of the aspects of the Tauros that I think is really cool is we got a chance to see a few Mirror Herb Tauros so far, and I would love to see if that's going to end up playing a role here today too.
Yeah, I think as we start, you know, kind of the team preview phase, one of the questions I have is for James, do you have confidence in bringing the Gothitelle? I think it's really awkward into the opposing team because there's the dual Ghost type in the Mimikyu and the Golden Gold, there's the Meowscarada as well, so that's a Pokemon I wouldn't expect to see as much. The Hydreigon on James's team is also Choice Scarf. I'm not sure that's actually super valuable here because I think Jiseok is a team that's a little bit slower and bulkier, so getting that speed advantage for maybe kind of a surprise KO isn't as valuable in this one, and so I think it would make sense to play towards like Cetitan, Abomasnow, Rotom Heat, and then the last slot I think you can flex between Tauros and Hydreigon. For Jiseok, I think like Golden Go and Tauros are both really strong in dealing with the Snow duo, right? You get the Intimidate from Tauros, the Golden Go just has good offensive coverage. I think Garganackle can be really interesting kind of as a late game option. You, of course, can look towards a defensive Terra with that as well later on in the match, and then I think like Baxcalibur is a Pokemon that's interesting here, but do you feel confident bringing it into the Snow duo, especially with the defense boost? I'm not so sure, so then maybe you flex between Mimikyu and Meowscarada as the final slot. But let's get into this game.
Oh, I'm so excited. Our first top 8 match here being featured at the 2023 San Diego Regional Championships, and we're kicking it off between James Evans and Jiseok Lee. We're going to see the leads coming out now, and the Garganackle's hitting the field early here, Aaron. Garganackle and Golden Go for Jiseok, and for James, it will be that Tauros with the Intimidate and the Rotom Heat.
Yeah, so I think right now James definitely is putting on more pressure in terms of offense. Rotom Heat here, of course, with the Choice Specs and that Overheat puts on a lot of offensive pressure into the opposing Golden Go. And so Golden Go on the opposite side kind of caught in a weird spot right now. Intimidate, you know, not really that valuable into Garganackle. It's not a Pokemon often really utilizes the attack stat. But of course, you do pressure with super effective damage right now. And yeah, like one of the main things that I think I'm really going to be paying attention to throughout the course of this set is just when do you go for a Terra, because I think there's so much explosive offense, especially from James's side. So if you can bait out a defensive Terra early on from Jiseok, then it gives you so much room to work with afterwards.
Yeah, and we're going to see a Terra to at least kick things off for this match. And we're going to see the Rotom actually take that Terra and Terrastalize to the Electric type. And I wonder if Jiseok's going to have an answer to this right now. As we look across the field, it's just going to be a Protect coming out here from the Garganackle in anticipation for something that might be able to hit it super effectively. But James not falling for that. Going to go for the Raging Bolt into the Golden Go, as there's going to be that Shadow Ball on the opposing side. But Rotom just going for the Thunderbolt here too, so good stuff for James here to just kind of get rid of that huge threat.
Yeah, and I like the decision to, you know, not commit an Overheat there as well. When you go for an Overheat, you're in a much more awkward position going into the next turn, and the Choice Specs Thunderbolt plus the Electric Terra just does a lot of damage. So just kind of ensuring you get the knockout onto Golden Go early. This is one of the awkward things about Garganackle, right? It kind of stays on the field and often will like slowly disrupt you, especially with Salt Cure. But I think nicely done from James saying, even if Garganackle attacks on turn 1, what are you really going to do? Maybe you threaten me with the Salt Cure, but it's not really going to knock me out. And so, yeah, I think Garganacl kind of just caught an awkward spot right now. It's an early lead for James, but the Tauros switch in for Jiseok here will allow him to get some more offensive positioning and threaten the Rotom with the super effective, or not so super effective anymore, Wave Crash or Close Combat.
Yeah, we've got a few options here that maybe Jiseok can go for. Honestly, I was looking at the Garganacl too and saying, well, it has access to wide guard, so maybe that was a bit more of a utility option there for the Garganacl. But Raging Bull into the Garganacl slot, as we do see the Tauros on the opposing side go for the Raging Bull. So Rotom been able to do a job of knocking out the Golden Go, but it is going to get knocked out itself moving into the next turns.
Yeah, you know, it's like a decent trade so far here. I think James could have considered maybe switching out, but, you know, to kind of reset the Intimidate. But getting free damage on a Garganacl I think is always nice. One of the things about fighting against Garganacl is Garganacl can hang on the field for a very long time thanks to the combination of leftovers and recovers. So you have to be pretty deliberate in how you're actually distributing damage onto it. It feels great right now to, you know, get like 40% onto it, but it can heal that all the way back in just, you know, one turn. One thing for Jiseok that, you know, is advantageous is that he has not committed the Terra yet. And so we see the Abomasnow, there's the Titan in the back as well, but there's no more Terra. However, one of the big things for James is that he hyper-focused on KOing Golden Go. And so by eliminating Golden Go, even though if you committed your Terra, now you don't have to worry about this late game, like make it rain strategy, and so that's why James was so hyper-focused on just eliminating that slot early on.
Yeah, I wonder if that was a bit of a tell, though. Maybe Jiseok is expecting to see the Abomasnow and the Titan in the back, and so knowing that that option is available, has planned around that. So we'll see exactly where his strategy will go for the rest of this game number one. But that the Titan is going to make an appearance here next to the Abomasnow that set the snow as it entered onto the field. Garganacl still playing it safe though, going to be able to heal up just a little bit behind that Protect and also keep itself safe. As the close combat comes through and Abomasnow is able to tank that, but is it going to be able to dish it back out against that Tauros?
There's the Blizzard coming out, and so, yeah, it's interesting seeing Blizzard being clicked there when there is the threat of the wide guard, but it's just going to do a little bit of damage there. But it gets the freeze!
What? No way! The Tauros was going to be able to pressure quite a bit there, but the freeze now. You're hoping that it's going to be able to thaw out, but not before the Titan's going to be able to get off an attack.
Yeah, the freeze makes things so much more challenging. I think it's just one of the hardest status conditions to play around because there's just no guarantee you're ever going to thaw out. And so one of the questions is kind of, do you know, still assume that it's going to thaw out immediately and cover for that option? Either way, though, I think right now, you know, the Garganacl is still sitting on the field, but Jiseok hasn't had a really great position to actually go for a Terra. And at this point, one of the questions I have is, are you actually going to be able to get a Terra at all? I think you might want to consider Terraing Garganacl this turn just to get rid of the super effective damage that might come out from this Titan.
Yep, we are going to see a Terra, and you were exactly right, Aaron. That is going to be a Garganacl terastallizing to the poison type, and it's not going to be able to make use of that in terms of damage output, but it does remove that super effective damage. Like, the liquidation does barely anything to it. Tauros is going to remain frozen for this turn, but now Abomasnow firing off another Blizzard, just continuing to chip away at this Tauros. But Garganacl is going to continue to remain on this field, especially after the recover.
Yeah, you can see where that freeze has a huge impact on this battle, right? If the freeze doesn't happen, the Tauros potentially can just knock out the Abomasnow, then it's, you know, stuck with the Titan in. You could actually consider pivoting Tauros out, bring it back in for another Intimidate. So the Poison Terra here is huge, but Jiseok still actually needs to get damage on the board right now, right? You can keep clicking Recover, sure, but at some point you need to go for the Sulk here.
All right, well, the Ice Spinner here from the Titan is going to knock out that Tauros, so it's not going to get a chance to do any more damage except for that one close combat. Blizzard now single target going into the Garganacl, as it's just going to be more Salt Cure time here. You got to do something, and at least Salt Cure will be able to get some damage down that will stick.
Yeah, I think this last Pokemon from Jiseok's end is going to be, it's going to have to put in a lot of work, right? But I think the thing with Garganacl is you can never discount it because it is so bulky, it can heal back so much, and I think the Poison Terra is perfect here. Get rid of the super effective damage coming out from Liquidation and a potential Energy Ball from the Abomasnow here, but let's see what the final Pokemon is. I think, you know, James wanted to prioritize knocking out the Golden Ghost specifically so that I can't just come out and like beat both of these Pokemon very easily, so that's once again why he hyper-focused on it. And so for Jiseok, yeah, I think like, all the Pokemon can put in some work. Part of the question is kind of the speed tiering here, but it is going to be the Mimikyu.
Oh.
The Mimikyu on Jiseok's team is actually fairly offensive. It's got the Life Orb and the Shadow Sneak as well. Now, one of the things is the snow is up, right? So you actually get the defense boost with both of your Ice-type Pokemon, but Abomasnow is fairly low right now.
Yeah, that... I kind of wonder if the Shadow Sneak would be enough to be able to knock it out here. And then you're also relying on the Selkier to be able to continue to chip away at this Titan. Tauros is still in the back. Maybe you're able to land and intimidate down, so we will see a rotation come through. Abomasnow now leaving the field, and Tauros does get a chance to come back in.
Yeah, Garganacl honestly looks really strong right now, though, right? It like has eaten up all this damage. You can continue clicking Recover and Sulk here. I like the idea behind just getting an Intimidate here, but let's see how much Ice Spinner does right now into Garganacl. It's not really that much damage, but ooh, there's the play rough. Into Tauros slot, does not go for a Shadow Sneak, is just able to get the knockout, and I'm not sure there's actually any answer to the poison Garganacl. We'll see if it clicks Recover here. I think this turn is really, really critical. And Jiseok very correctly does go for Recover. I think part of the thing with Garganacl is you have to be really smart about when you click Recover. If you ever miss the opportunity to do so because it's so slow, then you can just double up into it for a knockout like the subsequent turn. But this offensive Mimikyu, really, really huge getting the knockout. And yeah, Abomasnow as the Titan just can't really break through Garganacl. So even though Garganacl was out on the field through the entire game, the combination of Recover plus Leftovers was just so powerful, and James just doesn't have like super effective damage into it. That's where the Poison Terra is so nice for it.
Yeah, that was a great defensive Terra to be able to take away its weaknesses to what was across from it. But you still got to try something. So maybe, just maybe, James isn't out to be able to freeze another Pokemon here, as Mimikyu just goes for the Protect to keep its disguise intact and maybe get rid of some of that single target damage. But a big double Protect here coming in from Jiseok.
And it makes sense, you know, Snow is slowly going to expire, and so, yeah, might as well just buy a turn, get some more Salt Cure damage, and I think Jiseok's actually very well positioned at this point, and part of it is, yeah, Garganacl is just eating up a lot of damage and then able to heal it all the way back up. I think if you look at James's team, there aren't that many ways to actually get like huge amounts of burst damage onto it, and so with that Protect, now the Snow is stalled out, Garganacl continues to heal up, Mimikyu can pressure the Abomasnow with the Shadow Sneak. I would think without the defense boost now, the Shadow Sneak does just get the knockout, and Titan is just slowly eating up all the Soul Cure damage as well. So this is so interesting because it felt like James had an early lead, but Jiseok was just kind of waiting to a position where you can just actually Terra the Garganacl, and eliminating Rotom was a really big deal because that's actually probably the best answer into Garganacl from the 4 Pokemon that we've seen.
Yeah, it was super, super patient play here. Mimikyu's still just going to go for a Shadow Claw, so it's also quite fast, knowing that it's going to be able to secure the knockout there. And we're going to have to see if the Titan's going to be able to put in any work. The Ice Spinner coming through into the Garganacl, just not nearly enough damage. So Soul Cure once again, as the Titan is now definitely a knockout range from this Mimikyu too, after another Self-Cure at the end of this turn.
This was like a masterclass on how to use Garganacl. I was so impressed in this game, and I think that, you know, it felt like Jiseok, it was like, okay, the Garganacl is on the field, it's not really doing much, but then we got to a point where as soon as that defensive Terra came out, there was just no more like clear damage output from James's end. So I think, you know, James now surely realizes, okay, Garganacl is a huge threat to me going into the next game, and even though I eliminated the Golden Go, which cleared the path for Abomasnow the Titan, Abomasnow the Titan don't actually do that much damage to Garganacl. So I think when you think about ways to beating Garganacl, you kind of have to burst it with a lot of damage. Special damage in particular is really valuable, and so I think like Hydreigon didn't come out in that last matchup. Draco Meteor or Dark Pulse from that can be pretty valuable. I think you might want to try to figure out how to utilize Rotom a little bit better. For example, saving it, commit the Poison Tether from the opposing side, and then, you know, go for like an Overheat, for example. James's Rotom actually has Trick as well, so you can potentially trick Choice Specs onto it, and I think that can actually be really handy because then Garganacl's just locked into one move. But obviously that's really hard to execute, and with an open team sheet format, Jiseok also knows that the Rotom has Trick, so you're not just going to be able to get that off very easily, but I think the matchup actually looks really difficult given how well Jiseok kind of approached it in that previous game.
Yeah, I mean, the patience and just knowing the calculations to be able to ensure survival so that Garganacl could even Terra to the Poison type later was very, very key in that first match. But going into game number 2 of this best of 3, James definitely has options to be able to bring it back. And so I love that you call out maybe the Hydreigon coming in here, and maybe seeing the Heat Rotom again, maybe go for something a little bit different. But I don't know if the snow is going to do it. Like, it felt very underwhelming towards the end of that game 1.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think part of it is that, like, there's just so much bulk for Jiseok to work with. That Mimikyu, by the way, I think is such an interesting set, like Life Orb with Shadow Claw and Play Rough. I feel like we've been so conditioned to look at Mimikyu as like a Trick Room user, and it can be more support-oriented, especially when it was used throughout like Sword and Shield, for example, or maybe a Shadow Sneak user to activate Weakness Policy, but Fairy is actually really good coverage in this format, right? And you look at how Mimikyu matches up offensively into the opposing team, you've got a super effective Play Rough into the Hydreigon, which is really, really important. And so, yeah, I think for Jiseok, maybe you can adapt the lead a little bit because it felt like, you know, the Golden Go kind of just went down, but I think it's really impressive that even despite maybe turn 1 that it didn't feel super good, Jiseok clearly had a game plan to say, okay, well, you know, Garganacl can kind of just win. I just have to cover for the special attackers, eliminate Rotom early, makes the match so much easier for him. And so I think that's one of the main interactions we're going to watch out for here, right? How does James actually deal with Garganacl quickly enough?
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like that's where, like, I thought it was a bit telegraphed, you know, James putting so much emphasis on trying to get rid of the Golden Go, knowing that that would be a huge threat to the Titan and the Abomasnow in the back, but I think Jiseok saw that, so was able to play around that strategy. But we are in game number 2, and it's going to be Baxcalibur and Garganacl here versus the Hydreigon and the Rotom. What do you make of this? I mean, Baxcalibur versus Hydreigon here.
Yeah, Baxcalibur, an interesting adjustment here to put on a little bit more offensive pressure in the early game. Now, normally you might feel a little bit scared against the opposing Hydreigon, but of course Baxcalibur can just go for a potential defensive Terra. This is Water Terra. One of the interesting things about Water Terra, though, is if you commit that Water Terra, then you'll take super effective damage from Rotom's Thunderbolt. So you have to be pretty careful about when to go for the Terra, but I like James's decision to go for the Hydreigon. It's kind of what I was talking about earlier. And I think Tauros here is a really nice switch in to just get a quick Intimidate off onto the opposing Baxcalibur.
Yeah, that's going to be really helpful here as well, and maybe help keep it in check long enough for that Hydreigon to be beneficial in the late game versus that Garganacl. But it is just a protect here from that Baxcalibur and a double protect here for the Garganacl as well on Jiseok's side. So, oh, the trick, it tried to happen.
And that's kind of what I was talking about, you know, going into the second game. So I like the idea to just go for Protect with both Pokemon. You know you're up against Choice Scarf Hydreigon and Choice Specs Rotom, so if you go for Protect, you know exactly what moves they'll have to commit to the subsequent turn. What's interesting now is what does Garganacl actually switch out into? If there is the Golden Go in the back, that would be the perfect Pokemon to bring out, knowing that Rotom is stuck with this trick, right? And so I think Garganacl here, you could actually go for the prediction that like Rotom is actually going to stay, like just switch out here, right? And so this turn is actually really interesting. I think the safe play for Jiseok is if you have the Golden Go, which I expect in the back, you can just bring it in fairly easily. Tauros on the opposing side doesn't really threaten that Golden Go that much either way. And so, yeah, it looks like James here is not going to go for anything too crazy. He's just going to switch out the Rotom, which I think is important because Rotom is so critical in beating this Garganacl in the late game.
Yeah, gonna preserve that special attack for sure. So Abomasnow now being revealed as that 4th and final Pokemon. So there is no Titan and Abomasnow pairing in the back. So really important information for Jiseok to keep in mind. And it's gonna be a switch from him as well. Garganacl going out in favor of this Golden Go, taking that Raging Bull pretty well here. And then also just a great switch in here for James to be able to eat up that attack from the Baxcalibur.
Yeah, nice trade in damage there. You can see how valuable Intimidate plus the Snow defense buff is for Abomasnow there. It doesn't even take 50% of its health. So Golden Go does come out, and yeah, that Raging Bull did less than 50%, and so Golden Go right now, of course, does threaten with a very powerful Make It Rain. And so one of the questions is, yeah, how do you get around this if you are James? Baxcalibur right now is kind of in a weird spot where it just went for the Glaive Rush, and it's also Intimidated, so it's not doing like that much damage, but I think it's certainly put on a lot of pressure in the early game, and it's kind of forced James to respond accordingly.
Yeah, we can see the attacks coming through here from the Abomasnow as well as the Tauros, so just a big protect here, trying to soak up some of that damage, but Baxcalibur going for a protect again. Jiseok once again going into this game with confidence, but also patience. I mean, that Shadow Ball's gonna come through, but not quite enough to get the knockout, so Blizzard able to fire off from this Abomasnow, and like you really are hoping that maybe you get some damage down on the Baxcalibur, but that was minuscule on that Golden Go.
Yeah, it was minuscule, but it puts it in range of a KO from Raging Bull, and so I think James is kind of surprised to have survived the Shadow Ball. I saw him jump up a little bit. I'm honestly also surprised about that, so Abomasnow having very impressive bulk. But yeah, now it's interesting because you know the Golden Go has choice specs, and so you know you can go for a Raging Ball until that slot really safely. Don't really know if Jiseok feels safe switching in Baxcalibur, or sorry, the Garganacl into that slot either. And so, yeah, it was a nice trade. I think if Abomasnow goes down there, things might be a little bit trickier. And, you know, eliminating Golden Go is always nice, although in this matchup, maybe not as important since there's no Titan in the back this time around. But both players are being very careful about conserving their Terras so far, which I think is smart.
You gotta wait for that right moment too, but a switch here from James, so changing up the board position once again. Feels safe to bring in that Hydreigon, as it will be on the receiving end of a Shadow Ball from this Golden Go. I mean, you're dropping the special defense, that feels pretty bad. The Ice Spear is going to be able to knock out this Abomasnow. I don't think James was expecting to get a chance to move with it again, and at least he gets a free switch back in now. Yeah,
it was interesting. James is deciding to actually go for the switch there rather than maybe just targeting, you know, Golden Go with the Raging Bolt there. So get some new positioning here. One thing that I think is actually really interesting about this matchup is that the Baxcalibur, with it being Ice type, actually gets the buff from Snow as well, which is really amusing. And so Tauros' damage output maybe isn't as great as you'd really like it to be. And one of the other things that you have to think about here as James considers the Heat Wave is potentially activating the Thermal Exchange on Baxcalibur as well. And so I really like the Baxcalibur adjustment. I think it's tricky because, you know, there's so many good defensive Terras that Jiseok can go for, right? And I feel like James's team has like a lot more offense, but if you don't get the right Terraing or don't get enough out of your offensive Terra, then Jiseok can just overwhelm you with like late game defense. Is exactly like how he did with Garganacl in that previous game. And so their turn is pretty critical. There is a lot of offense that James is threatening. He can potentially knock out both Pokemon on the opposing side, but you could consider a defensive Terra here or just protect and switch out, for example.
Definitely. I mean, this was a really, really tough decision for James to make as well. You could see, like, okay, do you really go for the Terra here? It was a quick switch back and forth about whether or not he really wanted to go for that, but he is going to commit to the Terastallization onto the Hydreigon. Heat Wave trying to come through here, will be able to hit both opponents, so that Golden Go gets knocked out, but the Thermal Exchange from this Baxcalibur is activated by that hit from the Heat Wave.
Okay, let's see. Oh, I did not think about that very much, but the attack increase. Is this enough to KO now? Let's see.
Very well might be enough, and it is.
That was such a sick play. Take a bow, James Evans. That was amazing, and that's one of the really cool things you can do with Mirror Herb. It opens up for plays like that, right? And so great job to identify that as a possibility. Now you at least know the Hydreigon has committed, you know, the Terra, but I think that was so cool. Wow.
I mean, doing the calcs in his head, right? Like, okay, do I Terrastallize? Do I get enough damage down where the Mirror Herb is going to be able to pick up the knockout after that attack boost? So super well played here. And now as well, this Tauros is going to be in pretty uncontested unless Jiseok has maybe his own Tauros in the back.
Yeah,
I would Intimidate drop or something.
It's going to be a question. Yeah, I would think Tauros or Mimikyu. Now, Mimikyu is interesting, right? Because you can just go for that play rough, and Garganacl can actually go for a wide guard. And the main thing here is that Jiseok has not committed that defensive Terra yet, and so you have the ability to, you know, Terra the Garganacl and have this kind of late game, defense. But one of the main things here is this time around, James does have both of the special attackers still around in the Hydreigon and the Rotom, so really, really well done to conserve both of those throughout the course of this matchup. The Mimikyu here also does not have Trick Room, and so James will essentially have the speed advantage with all of his Pokemon relative to the opposing side. But I like the decision to switch out the Hydreigon here because you know there's the Wide Guard on the opposing side, and Heat Wave right now isn't exactly that powerful. Rotom will then be super well positioned, and this time it's harder for the Garganacl to just go for that Poison Terra and kind of sweep, and there is the potential for this trick now that Rotom has been conserved this entire game.
You can see the calculations that James has been making this entire game to bring himself back into this best-of-3 series. But it's time for Jiseok to use that Terra Orb, and it will be Garganacl that will Terastallize once again to that Poison type. So playing this defensive long game, as he knows that's going to be his way to victory here, as it was in game number 1. But James, look at that, a protect from the Tauros as well, just to be able to keep it safe, and hoping that it's going to be the play rough that it catches, and that is exactly what it is. Jiseok he knows that Tauros is going to be a huge threat here.
I really, really love how James played this, and I actually think that Heat Wave into Mirror play is one of the coolest ones I've seen this entire tournament and throughout Scarlet and Violet. And so we'll see if he can actually, you know, take it over the finish line now. I think one of the decisions you have to make here is, do you go for Trick or do you kind of go for Overheat and just burst the damage here? And, you know, Mimikyu still is very, very scary in terms of its offensive output, right? And so, yeah, I think James has two things to consider here. You could also like double up onto the Mimikyu, which it looks like he's potentially considering. And so, you know, Garganacl was so strong in the end game of that previous game, and right now hasn't actually taken any damage, and so very well likely could actually kind of clean up the game once again here. The Hydreigon, you know, will have to be locked into one attack as well, so you have to be pretty smart about what attack do I actually choose to lock myself into. But James definitely has way more resources this time around to actually kind of close out this game, but we'll see if he can actually secure it over the finish line.
Yeah, so going for the Raging Bull, at least to be able to break the disguise of that Mimikyu. And you know, seeing that Rotom was going to be able to go for a second move as well. I mean, he does lose his Tauros to that play rough from Mimikyu. So, gonna hit this time around, but what do you do here if you are James? I mean, you Volt Switch, so you get some nice damage down onto that Mimikyu, but do you think that the Hydreigon and the Rotom are going to be enough here? Yeah,
that's kind of tough. I think like there's the potential to like maybe double up onto the Garganacl that turn, or like Aqua Jet Overheat, for example. But now Sulkier comes out. It's going to deal super effective damage as well. And one really key interaction previously was that the Rotom was slower than the Mimikyu, right? So you can just potentially go for that Shadow Sneak. Now one of the questions I have is, does the Hydreigon have the ability to actually get a one-hit knockout onto the Mimikyu slot there? And so James committing for the Volt Switch rather than the Overheat, I think might punish him a little bit here. And so, yeah, like, do you have enough damage at this point in the end game, right? And so a Heat Wave here, I think, will just finish off the Mimikyu. You could commit to Dark Pulse as well. Now, Heat Wave is a little bit risky because, of course, the Garganacl could potentially go for a Wide Guard, but Mimikyu is going to start this with the Protect.
All right, so James is going to put a lot more of his focus there onto the Garganacl, but it's going to be a Protect from both Pokemon on Jiseok's side, so none of this damage is going to be able to stick here. But you do get a nice sense of maybe what this Rotom is going to be trying to target down. Yeah,
I really like the decision here by Jiseok, right? It's just safe and you get Sulkier damage, and now you can actually just go for Shadow Sneak to finish off the Hydreigon. I would think with Life Orb and Hydreigon no longer being Dark typing, that is just enough for it to faint. And so 37 now, down to 16, so low. And both of these choice Pokemon, yeah, just can't really do too much defensively here. And so even though it felt like James had a nice lead, especially with kind of that double up play earlier, here's Shadow Sneak from Mimikyu, and that should just finish off the Hydreigon as it does.
Yep, that's going to be another knockout secured here, and now James down to his final Pokemon. You can see the reaction in the camera. He's like, I think I know how this one is going to end. But the Rotom as well, he can at least get another knockout there with the Thunderbolt, but it's up to this Garganacl here on Jiseok's side, and unfortunately, being locked into that Thunderbolt, it just might not be enough, especially when this Sulkier is going to be dealing that super effective damage and also start to chip away at it.
Yeah, to me, I think the main turn in this game that I'll point to is the turn where essentially Aqua Jet came out, then the Mimikyu just got the one-hit knockout with Player Off onto Tauros, and then Rotom only went for a Volt Switch there. I think there is the potential to maybe go for a Thunderbolt or Overheat in that position instead, and then you have this endgame where you have two really strong special attackers and you've knocked out Mimikyu. But the fact that Mimikyu hung around for as long as it did means that Jiseok just had two Pokemon applied a lot of pressure. So amazing job by Jiseok Lee, who now will be advancing on in the tournament. And his team, I think, is so interesting. We have not seen that many Garganacls on stream. And I feel like in both of those games, there were points where it felt like maybe he was at a deficit, but he kind of just kept his calm, was, you know, stayed collected, and I'm just amazed. Like, that was just a masterclass in how to utilize Garganacl.
Yeah, I think Garganacl, I mean, it's already made it so far into this tournament to be able to secure Jiseok a spot in the top 4. But James Evans with that Snow team proving that weather is still a force to be reckoned with, and especially after the changes from hail to snow, really cool to see that in action.
Yeah, amazing run, of course, by James, who has just been lights out in a lot of the last events that we've saw him in. Of course, won the North American International Championships and will be the defending champion for that tournament in a few months. But also, we casted him in Milwaukee Regionals. He got top 4 there, and, you know, world champion in the seniors division. But I am so excited to see Jiseok Lee advance on in this tournament as well, because like I mentioned, I think he was just one of the most impressive players. I know I personally drew a lot of inspiration from him and was constantly following what archetypes he was using. I think he was one of the best pilots of Palkia Calyrex Ice Rider back in 2022. And yeah, I'm really glad that he gets to show just how good he is in an in-person tournament here in North America. And so congratulations to him, and yeah, just using this Poison Garganacl in such an awesome manner. I think the other thing about Garganacl is I think a lot of players were just using like Iron Defense Body Press without help protect on it earlier on in the format, right? Iron Defense, Body Press, Recover, and Sulk here. But I feel like the Protect was such an essential move for Garganacl throughout the course of this set, and allowing it to kind of bait out those potential tricks early, you know, playing defensively with it, and just finding the right spot to position it. But yeah, I think if there's one turn to point to where maybe things could have gone differently in this endgame and potentially could have led to a win for James, it's going to be the turn where it was Tauros going down to that play rough, and Rotom maybe could have considered going for another move in that